Hey, so we were thinking about how to start this, and we thought maybe we'll just press record, and then you'll have to fast forward whenever we get warmed up.
Yeah.
So we came here to Bosque de Bosque do. I forgot the name of this place.
Gee, I don't know the name at all.
It's a little river walk. We have recorded some other videos here. Maybe 5-minute walk from our house. So we go up this hill, Vista Alegre, and then we across this cafe. We just go down this hill, and then it's like this gorgeous area here.
There's a river.
Yeah, you can hear the river. Lots of beautiful trees. So just gorgeous. So we come down here. Nilu hasn't been able to come down here much
Yeah.
because her knees messed up, and then I'm still dealing with my hand. So we're just figuring all this out. And then we just recently we rented a car. We went to, what was it? Asturias. We went to Asturias, and I talked about that on my podcast a little bit about what it was like traveling, how beautiful it is, how different it is from Galicia. And then we were thinking like, yeah, there's some good topics that we can probably talk about regarding relationships, because we had some good conversations, I think, on the way back, right? On the way back in the rental car, we talked about some relationship stuff, and then we're like, yeah, we got to do another episode together, because if we ever do an episode, it'll be like either on my podcast about some particular topic, or it'll be like like we did that YouTube live, the YouTube live video that's on this channel. And that one was more about like traveling and trying to answer some questions. But this one, we thought maybe we could talk about loneliness. And I have I think, a article that I wrote on my website, on digitalnomadphysician.com, about loneliness, about that whole thing of like meeting people, making friends and stuff. But maybe we can address it from, I don't know, both of our
Well, I
perspectives.
guess, yeah, we were talking about, I don't know how we got to relationships. We were talking about death, actually. And then we were talking about, oh, yeah, and I remember what we were saying, and we thought it would be cool to record it together because it was a good conversation, you were saying how you reframed your over time, over the relationships that you had, you were able to have come to a different relationship with the idea of a romantic relationship. And that so it was really, for me, it was really interesting, you talking about how that came about, and that you ultimately noticed that there was so much that there was suffering from this idea of like, I have to be in a romantic relationship and she has to be this way or that way, right? And so when you noticed how much suffering you were getting from that, you started to you were like, no, I'm not gonna sort of subscribe to this belief anymore. And it's sort of like similar to my journey, although I always feel like you were sort of like better, you were more successful at like getting rid of those beliefs. And like, but one of the thing was like becoming okay with being alone. And I guess we also thought this would be relevant into your channel because as a as a human being, but also as a digital nomad, if you're moving around, there's loneliness, or there's being alone, but also like, you know, just in general. So
I think you can feel alone, and that can become this like narrative or story of like being lonely if you're doing something on your own, if you're doing something new. Like I feel like I'm doing something new in medicine in general, right? Like health coaching and starting my own virtual practice that's cash-based. I'm doing a lot of things alone. I feel a little unsupported or alone doing it. And when I set off to leave Portland in 2017 or 2016 is when I was thinking about it. 2017 when I just like decided I was going to go. I felt lonely going. I felt alone, and I'm like, how am I going to deal with those emotions? But that was piggybacked on like several years of like just thinking about relationships and how desperate I was before, of jumping from one date to another date to another date in search of finding somebody that was a good match for me. I thought you had to date a lot of people to find that out. And then I thought I realized it was counterproductive. And I said, maybe if I just kind of understand myself a little bit and kind of
Why did you realize it was counterproductive?
I was going from date to date to date. In fact, in this modern economy that we have, it's really easy to find dates. There are so many different apps and methods and ways of finding dates. It's not really that difficult. If you find it, I think if anybody who's listening to this thinks it's difficult to find a date, you probably just haven't gone to the proper
Did
channels.
you have any kind of like a list of what you were looking for?
I made a list at some point. I made a list of what I was looking for. And then I was listening, it was 2016, and I was listening to Aziz Ansari's book on audio. And I realized in the first few pages of his book, I realized like how counterproductive that was, because if you ask me a week from then, or a couple of weeks from then, or a month from now, like what is it that I wanted, it would have changed. And I didn't know what I wanted. How would I know what I want if I haven't had it yet? Right? So it was counterproductive for me to think in that regard. I think I was coming from a point of, if I did believe that, oh, I think the girl should be like this, and she should be a great conversationalist, she should be like this, she should have her own career, she should have her own money, and this, and like all these different things that I could think of, it would have, first of all, I would have never found that person. The more detailed I made the list, the more unlikely it is that I was going to meet that person. And if I made that list and I approach someone, my mind is not primed with that idea.
Does she meet all the check?
Does she meet all
But
the
you know
check
what's
marks?
interesting is that like that we're really told. So I guess like the direction of this conversation is going towards that, like kind of like meeting people and relationships, because for me that's always something that was really interesting. And but you are told in sometimes when you are like in that struggle of meeting somebody, you need to be very specific about what you want, like write everything that you want, like up to details. You need to be able to imagine it. I mean, that's like one school of thought, right? Like you need to be able to
Visualize
visualize
it
it. But in general, it's like you have to know what you want, right? That's what I was always told. You have to know what you want.
If you want something very particular, you should know, you should have very important criteria set. But if you're of the school of thought that you're loving life, you trust life, you enjoy certain things of life, and you don't want a kid in the next 2 years, you don't have to be married in the next 24 months. If you don't have those, then you can leave it be. You can let it be much more open if you're open to that journey, because it's kind of a journey. It's kind of an excitement.
You know what I just thought is, I think is interesting, because like even when you know, let's say you know, you're like, okay, this is, because for me, I thought if you asked me in my late 20s, in my early 30s, what do you want? I mean, I think it was like, okay, I want somebody like that looks this way, that's educated, that's family oriented, like whatever that means, you know, like the stuff that you think is important, or wants to get married and wants to have a family, because that's the stuff that I thought makes for me to be happy in a relationship, and makes for a guy that just doesn't want to just have fun. You know, that's what you were told growing up as a woman, is like, you know, you need to be specific, and you need to read out like sort of like, and I don't think that's a bad advice, but for me, I used to write those lists, and I didn't, you know, I didn't find that guy at that time when I was writing that list. So then I thought, okay, like maybe, so then you start thinking like, oh, I'm not specific enough, or I'm not, you know, but so what was I going to say when you were saying that? I thought, actually escaped me.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, my journey of like, I think loneliness kind of continued a little bit when I was in Portland, because I had decided when I was in LA in 2014 that I wasn't going to pursue that whole train anymore, like just jump from dating to dating, like another person to another person, because in each person I just essentially found my own insecurities. And
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you because
go
I
ahead.
remembered.
Go.
Because I think, but I think what would have been more helpful, as opposed to be very specific about these things, is like, what is it that you're hoping to have or feel when you have somebody with this list, right? because then it makes you realize, like, for example, I think is that I want to be able to connect with someone. I want to be able to, and it might be like I want to be able to, like, let's say, raise children, and you're like, okay, well, this is really my priority. For me, my priority was, I didn't even realize it at that time, but I really wanted to feel loved by someone. And
But I think that's where a lot of people, maybe that's where a lot of people find problems, is because they start out so broad and they have no idea what to do with it. That's why they make a list. Does that make sense?
no, what do you mean?
So a lot of people, the reason people go for online dating and they make a list is because when somebody asks them, like, what do you want? I just want to be loved. I want somebody that loves me and I want to be in a romantic relationship. Because that doesn't get them anywhere, they start making lists and they start. So
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying.
So I think one option is to go back, is to say, no, we don't have to be so specific. We don't have to make lists. We don't have to like do all of that. But you do, I think for every single person, maybe there is a way that you have to reframe it. And for me, reframing it meant I just got to be okay being alone, first of all. Like, can I believe that I'm okay being alone? That might be a sad thought for some other people, but
But I'm like curious, what made you do that? Because is it because you were like dating and you were like, let's say, going on this date and that date, and then like being on this app, and it was frustrating, or
every
is
time
it?
I wasn't dating, every time I wouldn't go on a date, I felt like I was missing out, or I was lonely, or like desperate, or I'm like, dude, you should go on a date. And I felt bored, and I'd hop on a dating app, you know? And I'd say, okay, now I'm meeting people. This is good. This is the right thing to do. And then I'm like, why is this the right thing to do? I had no answer. Well, because you should be in a romantic relationship. Why should I be in a romantic? Because you have needs. You can go get a prostitute. Like if that doesn't make
If it's
sense.
like a sexual need?
If it's a sexual
Well,
need.
what about like affection and that kind of need?
Sure. So like, do I need that affection from a romantic partner, right? Like, could it be from like friends, family, or that sort of stuff? Affection, love, you know? I didn't think that I needed a very particular type of romantic attention, that I thought I had to go to that romantic route. And I said, okay, then this is not going to work, because when I'm not dating, I feel like something's wrong, and that is wrong to me.
So when you weren't dating, if you weren't on an app or if you weren't going out, you felt like I should be doing that.
I should be dating. I should like.
And then when you did go on a date, how would you feel?
Then I think I came in with so much baggage that like I either confused myself. I could not decide on the person. If we started going out on a few more dates, or maybe started actually dating, like a little longer term, after a few months, I started finding so many flaws in that person that I wasn't really seeing that person at all. I was just seeing all my own insecurities and whether she checked anything off that I wanted in her. So I was just looking at myself, and I'm like, I was just getting frustrated looking at myself in the mirror of that person. I wasn't never seeing that person. I was never really letting that person be that person. I could have never dated a girl.
That was what year when you were like having these frustrations?
2016, late 2015, 2016, and late 20, hold on, I was in San Diego. So 2014, 2015, and then early 2016, I was like, kind of like, oh, yeah, this is not gonna.
So then you were like, do you remember at one point you were like, you know what? No, I'm not gonna date. I don't care. Like, was it like, did it come from a good place?
Yeah,
from
there was
a positive
the
place?
last date I went on that I recall, where I was actually like, I had set up this date based on like an app. Like I was on an app. It was in Portland early when I had gotten to Portland, and I said, I'm gonna go on this date. And then I went on the date. We kind of went out a couple of times, and I lost interest, and I couldn't explain why I lost interest. And then I was at that point kind of comfortable with myself. I had gotten to a comfortable place with just many other aspects of myself, and I'm like, why is this person so upset that we're not hanging out anymore? And I'm like, I wonder if I would be that upset if she stopped messaging me. I'm like, no, I don't think I would be. So I'm like, that's interesting. So maybe she's in a different place, or maybe I led on to something, or maybe she has an expectation that I can't meet. And I'm like, this is good. This is like a really interesting place that I'm in. And I said, okay, so and then I had to contact her and be like, which I couldn't do before. I usually would maybe ghost people or just kind of slowly fall off the planet. And I'm like, let me explain it to her. I'm like, hey, listen, like it really isn't anything about you. It's nothing personal. It's just like, I don't know why. I don't have the desire to go out another date. And like, I feel like I really enjoy your company, but I couldn't tell you when and how. And so maybe I don't have a romantic interest in you, even though like I think we're such a good fit. And she was upset by that, of course, but that was it, you know, like,
And she was okay.
yeah, she's like, oh, okay, well, thanks for explaining it to me, but like, I feel like you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. Like,
You shouldn't have let me on or whatever.
yeah, maybe something like that, something along
Right,
that.
right.
It wasn't that dramatic. And so I think for me, it was a good time to then just kind of reflect back, like, oh, hey, like you can just totally be okay being single and being alone. And I think I went on another date after that. I don't remember with who, but I think we went out on a couple of dates, and then I kind of realized how quickly my interaction with this girl who, oh, she was working at this laser tattoo removal clinic while I was volunteering, and I met her, and I'm like, hey, let's go grab a drink sometime, because Portland, you do that. But it very quickly turned into something romantic. I'm like, oh wow, I don't have the ability yet to interact with women like very platonically, and I'm like, and it turned into like, okay, let's go out a couple. I'm like, yeah, this person's really interesting. I wouldn't mind going out on a date with her and go out, and then we had like 5 or 6 dates, and I'm like, no, that was the whole point. Like, this doesn't need to turn into a romantic thing. Like, you don't have a romantic feel for this girl. You're trying to turn this into something romantic and seeing if it goes somewhere. So I'm like, sorry, dude. Like, I don't feel like I want to do this romantically. And it was really, that one turned out really bad. Like, she was really upset by it because, well, she had the right to, I guess. You know, she had the right to feel how she was feeling. And then after that, it was really good, because anybody I met, I'm like, I have no intention of dating you. It was like, you're a dude, you know?
You started looking at women more like...
I started looking at women and men as very much the same. Like, I want to have a connection with you. I want to get to know you. I want to meet you, and I want to have nothing. And if I did meet a woman who clearly had an interest in me, I would make it clear that I had no interest. And if it still didn't go away, well, obviously I would distance myself, because that doesn't make sense, right? I mean, she's never going to look at me as a potential friend.
But during this time, you had the interest of like being in a romantic relationship. Like, you always...
That never went away. I think I always felt like I am the kind of person who, like, I really enjoyed being in a romantic relationship with one person and just having that connection and that internal, the inside jokes and the things that I would have with one person. I always saw that as some kind of person I would likely be happy in that kind of relationship.
But you were like, kind of like maybe putting that in the back burner, or how were you?
I think what I decided was, I can't make that happen by wanting it to happen, and by wanting it to happen, I was also definitely making it not okay to not be in a relationship. And if I met every single woman with that expectation, I was never really going to connect with them, because all my wishes and hopes and insecurities and desires and things were immediately coming out to the surface. And I was sabotaging myself, because I was viewing all the negatives. I was viewing all the things that this person doesn't have. So why would I waste my time? Why do I waste my time with this girl if she doesn't have those qualities? So instead, I was realizing how I was developing was like, let me get to know this person. Let me really be present when this person's there. And, just get to know this person as a person, like no expectation of romance.
During this time, like, meet somebody and you were like, oh, like, I'm kind of attracted to this person, but let me...
Be buddies?
Right.
Yeah, I think I started definitely having a lot more female... I think it was a lot easier for me to be friends with women, and I started having more women friends. And and some of it, it was a little bit like, oh shit, like this is like maybe turning a little romantic. Let me like.
But during this time, did you ever feel like you wanted to be romantic with someone, and then like?
No, I don't think so. No, because, and I assume the reason that was because there wasn't any romantic connection. Does that make sense? If you're friends with 100 people, and you don't do anything other than just be friends with them, eventually you might develop a romantic feeling towards 15 or 20 of them. You might be like, oh, I kind of feel something a little deeper. Then you can pursue that, right? Then you can kind of maybe pursue that.
I guess I'm asking you all this because it's interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One is that I definitely have seen in you that you have, you're like, kind of at peace. I mean, I noticed it early on when we met that you were sort of like at peace with yourself, like kind of like more so than I had noticed in other people or even in myself. And like, and I know that you've had some stuff that you really like were like, okay, I'm going to accept this about myself.
Like binge eating.
Like binge eating. But also like when we met, and it was very like, we met we met platonically, and then but like
Well,
within
yeah,
a
I don't know
day
if
or
we ever
two.
told the story on here, but go ahead. I'll finish your story and then I'll tell the story.
Well, within a day or two, you were showing interest,
Mm-hmm.
like romantic interest, right? And of course, it was like reciprocated. I felt the same way, but and I was also in the phase of we had like a similar
But let me
journey in the
explain to you
sense.
why very quickly it that romantic part came out, because I had so much practice of being able to approach someone as genuinely as possible with no intentions. And so then it was so clear that if I then had a romantic feeling towards you, it wasn't because you were a woman, therefore I might have a romantic thing for you. It was more like you are a human being and I'm getting to know you. And look, oh, look, there's this romantic thing just like here in the background. And I had no intention of I had no intention of like making it work. I wasn't I wasn't buying like, I wasn't like putting my eggs in that basket. I wasn't trying to make it work. I was just like, I like hanging out with you. I want to hang out with you more. Like let's do something else together. Let's go do this together. And then the flirtation just kind of we started flirting like I think on the second date. Yeah, on the second date. That night, that evening when we went out to your friend's house. And I think that came about because it just came from it felt it felt natural. Like that flirting thing came out and I didn't have to hold it back. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it's different as opposed to like approaching you from that perspective of wanting
Right,
it
as
to
opposed
work
to, okay, I
out.
see what you're saying. Like, okay, here's a woman, right? She meets, looking at her
She's
or knowing
cute.
that she's a doctor or educator or whatever, she meets like 5 of the 10, like, let's say, check boxes, whatever. So now let me pursue her, let me flirt with her so that then we can go on into a relationship.
Let
Was
me
it more?
pursue her, flirt with her so that I can shove her into this mold that I have and see how much I can shove her into this mold. And then when it sticks out the sides, then I'll attack those one by one. And then I'll be frustrated and want to leave that relationship. Instead of like, so the way we met actually was, I had, back when I had my website and I took it down once, but I sent a message to everyone, said, hey, I'm going to be in LA. I was living in Spain at the time. And does anybody want to meet up? And she messaged back saying, "Yeah, actually, I'm headed back from like Northern California. I'm driving through Southern California. If you want to grab a coffee." And then there was another guy who wanted to meet up with me, and I think his thing fell through. So I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I'm at this coffee shop. I'll wait for you." I was at the coffee shop, and I think when I replied to you,
Right,
and
right.
so I just waited for her, and she came over there, and yeah, like obviously I expected somebody beat up and depressed and
He was
jaded and
pleasantly
suicidal. Yeah,
surprised.
I was like, oh, she's cute, she's hot, nice butt, and like we started. And then I think that was something that I noticed, but I think for me at that time it wasn't really hard to be like, this is just a person who has something similar. She's reading my blog, so she has a similar interests as me. She's interested in something different in medicine. She probably has the same. And so what we talk about initially, we immediately start talking about how we feel about medicine, where we at in medicine, burnout, and show me she's a rheumatologist and how we feel. And then, so we connected on that. And so that was it. That was great. Like that, I immediately felt that connection. I could have had that conversation with you for months on end. I could tell, like we were on the same kind of like frequency with conversations and talking, and none of us, I don't know, there was a connection. And so, like, I don't think the thought of like, oh, is this going to be romantic or not? Like, I didn't have to battle that. Does that make sense? I didn't have to, let me sit like this or talk like this or act like this to try to impress you or not be myself. I was like, I'm 100% myself. If I wanted to pick my nose, I would have picked my nose. If I wanted to go order some food and sit down and not make eye contact, I wouldn't have. And that felt really good because I think that also made you feel more comfortable around me. And obviously you had your own thing right before that and you were approaching the entire romantic relationship differently. But from my perspective, it was great because I could totally open that door to get to know the real you, who you are, how you are. And the romantic thought just came in after it was a really pleasant experience. We sat there for maybe an hour, I don't think more than that, at that coffee shop, Groundworks in downtown LA,
Yeah.
in Little Tokyo, I think. And then you're like, hey, this evening, I have a bunch of friends who invited me. I'm going to go to their house. Why don't you come? And I'm like, no, hell no. Like, I'm not social. I don't want to hang out with anyone. And then we left it at that. And then towards the end, you're like, you should come. I think it'll be fun, you know? And I'm like, yeah, I'll go. Because because I didn't feel, if I thought in any way that this was going to be a date, I would have 100% said no, because I would have wanted to be like, no, it's got to be on even grounds, and we got to be like,
Why? But that's curious. Why would you have said no? Because here's the thing. This is what I'm wondering. You were looking. You wanted. You weren't. I don't know if you would. Would you say you were looking for a romantic relationship
No,
at that phase in your
no.
life? But you wanted a romantic relationship. That's something that
No,
you
I wouldn't
always
even
wanted.
say that. I said, like, I think I would do well in a romantic relationship, but I was 100% totally okay. I
So
actually
you
could
weren't looking
visualize
for a
myself.
romantic relationship, and you weren't in the
No,
forefront of your mind. It wasn't that I want a romantic
no. Even
relationship.
when I was here in Spain, and there was a couple of girls who, like, I had chatted with in my fucked up
How could that be
Spanish.
possible, though? That's what I don't understand.
What is?
Like to be in that kind of a place where you're like genuinely not like at all looking or at all like I don't think I ever stopped wanting or looking for a romantic relationship, even when I had my journey into like really some one day being like,
Imagine you're going on a health journey, diet journey, weight loss journey, whatever, and then this idea of dessert comes up, and you're like, I don't want dessert. I don't want dessert because I have to beat this willpower into myself so I don't get fat. It's just like, I'm really happy with this thing that I found, this pleasant way of eating and this intuitive way of eating. And I think dessert messes me up. The sugar crash makes me want to eat more. That sugar gets me really anxious, and it just I don't do well with it. So I don't want it. I really,
how is that a romantic? Like I don't get it. How's the
so,
sugar thing?
yeah. So like you don't have the desire for it. You don't want it. And then suddenly like you're out and about with friends and something like that, because you didn't swear off desserts and it's like on your X list. You've built this really beautiful relationship with it, but you're like, no, it just doesn't seem like it's the right fit. When it really is the right fit, and you have been
When
like,
it's that vegan, gluten-free.
made by elves, sustainable, locally made.
Wow, I should really.
So
If
when
I'm the vegan gluten-free thing.
so I think when that comes, you just say, yeah, I like that. I'm gonna have a slice of this cake, or I'm gonna have a little bit of this dessert. But it doesn't come from this place of like, no, I'm not gonna be in a relationship. I'm not gonna have dessert. No, like it is wrong to have dessert.
Wow. So I mean, I guess kind of sense that like when I met you that you.
Or asexual.
No. When I met you is and you were telling me about all these female friends that you had and like in Spain, and that you were like really actually kind of trying to make sure that they know that you weren't interested in like dating them, and yet you were so quickly interested in dating me. And so I mean I felt like so whoa, like so special, but I mean now that you're telling me this, like I'm like, it's interesting because that's not somewhere that I can even see how I could never be there. I never was there to a place. The closest that I came to that place was that I was like on my journey is I always wanted a romantic relationship, and would go on dates or get set up or just go off like dating apps, but then always felt bad about it. I always suffered that I should be in a romantic
Like
relationship.
when you were alone or single.
Yeah, like that all my friends were like getting married, and that somehow like something was wrong with me, that I wasn't meeting somebody that I could, and then I would meet guys, obviously either just like on an app or somebody would introduce me or just random coffee shop. But that, I mean, that was the other part of the story, is that I felt like it wasn't going forward in, the way that I wanted it. It wasn't becoming like a good romantic relationship. But I think for me, like maybe at some point I was like, I'm like 40. That's when I told myself I'm 44 now, right? I was like, a few years ago, I was like, I'm 40. Like, it's so tiring. I'm just gonna let it, just whatever happens, happens. And then I noticed that I was like, wow, I really don't know how to be just with myself. Like I really don't know how to be happy just alone. Well, yeah, sometimes you're happy alone because you're like doing your thing and you're distracted. But then I realize like when I'm actually having the thoughts that like, oh, I am lonely or should be with someone. It's Saturday, I should be going out. Then I would feel really lonely. And so then I started becoming more interested in like how to actually be happy alone. And I remember I once said this thing to myself. This thought came to me that if somebody told you, Nilu, in 5 years, 10 years, you're going to meet this guy and it's going to be amazing. or a year, whatever, and it's going to just be the most wonderful relationship of your life. How are you going to spend this time from now until you meet that person? You know, like, it's definitely happening. Because I think so much of the suffering was also that it's never going to happen. That I'm 90 years old sitting there, like, you know, whatever. And it's like, and now how are you going to spend that time? And I actually was like, I'm just going to have fun. Like, I'm okay meeting guys, have it not work out, like, you know, whether it is romantic, whether it is sexual.
But
whether
you
it's
got
just
to that
friends.
place? You actually got to that place?
Yeah, but not to the extent that I felt like you were saying you got to, because I had these thoughts that I was like, I was thinking about how to not suffer single, right? And I was like, I was starting to reflect more on like how to reframe thoughts in my head, as opposed to, oh, by this age you should be married. By this age you should have children. By this age you should be in a romantic relationship. Your romantic relationships have never lasted more than 3 months. You know, all of these thoughts. It's like, you know what? I'm just gonna like focus on whatever comes next. And I was like, I had quit.
But you know, that's kind of fascinating, right? Because it goes to show you that even if you obsess over dating and finding a romantic partner, you may not find it. And then when you finally relinquish it as much as you're capable of relinquishing it, it still may not happen. And then all of a sudden it happens. So
that's
so,
why, like,
so all
yeah.
I'm saying is that maybe just whichever of those two is going to give you the least amount of suffering is better, because what might happen anyway. And so, exactly as you said, what are you going to do in those four to 5 years?
It's like, for me, like, it became, all along I wanted a romantic relationship. And I definitely think that up to this event, right before meeting you, this retreat that I went to, that I'm going to mention this thing about the retreat, but up to that point, I for sure, every time I would meet a guy that I thought was like cute, sort of like the look that I liked, or like I would feel attracted to, and they were like, had some of those check marks, looks being one of them. There was that push and pull, you know, like it wasn't. But I think I started to.
Well, there was always the push and pull. Even for me, I think there was always the push and pull. I'm never gonna completely shed my entire masculinity and things like that. I think that's difficult to shed. But I knew that when I was in the presence of another person who was like a woman, it was much easier. I felt like much more like myself, and I wanted to be myself, because I'm like, I don't want this person to think a certain thing of me. Let her see exactly what I am. That way it's off my plate. I don't have to worry about it. It's her problem now. And it's also my problem to get to know that person.
I'm understanding it is
but
like,
I think you also said that something interesting that you said is that I immediately knew I wanted to date you. And I think that's incorrect, because when I check back into that time, it wasn't so much that. It was just like, when I met you, after the day or two that passed, I liked your presence. I really enjoyed your presence, and I wanted more of that presence. I didn't label that as romantic. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. I wasn't planning on it going anywhere. But I'm the kind of person that when I imagined us just hanging out together more. And so that's why I remember a few days later we had the conversation of like, oh, we should go with Jeff to EDC and like go party in Amsterdam. And I said, like, of course.
That's not exactly true. Like, when we met out on the second day that we hung out, like, we hung out the first time, just platonic, hung out that night at my friend's house. Then the next day we were going to go rock climbing together. and then we instead met up in downtown, walked around, sat, we're having just a conversation, and you were like, do you have a boyfriend? Right?
That's when we went to the brewery.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the second time we hung out, and that to me was like, oh, you know, why do you care that I have a boyfriend? Like, you started showing that you were interested, and the next day you texted me, or like, you know, I can't stop thinking about you. So, so that romantic interest, showed up, and
the romantic interest
it.
was there that's what I was trying to say. Like, the romantic interest was there pretty much after the first maybe 20, 30 minutes of us having a conversation. The romantic interest never went away. It wasn't something that got extinguished with like a fire, like a fire. It just, but it was, for me in my head, for my personality, again, this is just me, I always led with that when it came to meeting the opposite sex, and it never worked for me. And so instead, if I just met people.
But this time it seems that to me like you both showed it, but you also tried to just stay interested in me as a person.
It wasn't so much that I showed it and this is what it was. I was just being myself at the moment. I
Right.
felt this way towards you, so I said what I felt. And I wasn't worried, as in the past, am I going to come across as desperate? Am I going to be intimidating? Is it going to do this? Is it going to do that? It's going to do what it's going to do. I'm going to be myself and obviously respect the other person and not like bulldoze them. But whatever comes of that, comes of that.
Right, and I really felt that with you, like when you were, I felt like if I, let's say, wasn't interested, and if I was like, no, like you would have been also perfectly fine being friends. Because I
had
think,
zero doubt. Like looking back at that time, I have zero doubt that if she was like, yeah, I have a boyfriend, and yeah, I smoke cigarettes. I remember those two questions I asked you. And I would have been like, oh, it's totally fine. Like I would love to just continue hanging out with you. But maybe, I think when I asked that question is like how much drama am I getting myself into if we continue this?
right, like
You
if you have
know?
a boyfriend already, then but yeah, I think it's, I guess what I was saying is like for me when I was, this topic has always been really interesting for me because yeah, now I'm, we're together and we're in this great relationship, but like it doesn't let me forget how many years I was suffering, right? In like, oh, I'm not in a relationship. And
How lonely you felt during those times. I mean,
and
that's
it's not
essentially
even
what we
just
were.
lonely, because like a lot of times I think loneliness is interesting because loneliness is not really, we all know that loneliness and being alone is not the same, right? Because you could be alone and at that time not be thinking that I shouldn't be alone, or others are paired up, or look, I have no plans, and you're totally like enjoying, let's say, whatever it is that you're doing at that moment, right? Whether it is reading something, whether it is just like, let me sit down and relax with this like glass of wine, or cook or whatever. But then there are times, and for me that's why I think it became interested, this whole like that so much of it is from mind. But before I met you, and I was entering this phase of like, you know what, I'm just like kind of giving up in a way. Like this isn't working. This whole like plan of like what I should be having as a woman, of like entering this like marriage and relationship, and like this whole future that's supposed to be part of my life, is not panning out that way. So I'm just gonna like fuck it, like I'm just gonna like see whatever comes on. I'm gonna have fun. If I'm meeting somebody I'm attracted to, I'm just gonna go with it. And maybe it'll just be a short relationship, maybe it won't be, maybe I won't meet anybody. But then the actual like crucial thing for me, I think, in my life happened when I went to that retreat, Byron Katie's retreat, and which is essentially like sitting with your belief and like looking at what belief causes your suffering. And I realized through like we had to like sit, like one of the days it was about like a belief on like the opposite sex. And suddenly it hit me that I am never, like what you said, neutral with guys. Like for me, I have like amazing female relationships. All my, like most of my friends are women, exception of one guy who is like, he has just been so good and from the beginning in the boundary, and there wasn't any romantic interest. And but most of the times,
Oh yeah, sorry, we didn't meet you in France, dude.
but
We tried.
but I mean, I think it's credit actually to him. But like, anyways, I think what it is that for me, I realized that I'm always, and I was always either trying to attract a guy, or I was in a way like being like rejecting, like, oh wait, no, I'm not interested. Like, is he showing interest? No, I'm not interested. Oh, but that guy's like a guy who was within my age limit, or potential, I guess. There was always that. There was always like never just a human being. It's just
But
a
we do that
guy.
even. We do that
It's just a human.
with friends too. I think we do that even with same-sex people. We sometimes are like, oh, do I want to even be friends with this person? Oh my God, are we about to be friends? Like, I don't want that. Like, we do that with just same-sex people as well, if we're interested in opposite sex. But we do that with opposite sex to a very detrimental level.
Oh yeah, to a huge extent.
But it comes from what though? I think it does come from that loneliness part of not wanting to be lonely.
Well, it comes from like also, yeah, it comes from, one is like the loneliness. I mean, I guess we started with the loneliness. That's going to probably be a different podcast, that really talking about the loneliness. Because
I don't think so. I think that is at the core of it.
Yeah, but I think there's two things.
We're not talking about how to pick up on chicks.
No, no, but I think there's. Well, I guess because I was going towards this
You
like.
can buy my ebook on how to pick up on chicks. It's $5.99 coming to an Amazon store near you.
No, because I guess where I was going is that was really like a light bulb of like, oh wow, like I
When
am
in that
really
retreat,
doing
when she
this.
highlighted that to you guys, you
She
were
didn't
like,
highlight it. Like I was sitting with myself and kind of like, whoa, like, and then after I came out of that retreat, I was like, wow, like, and I think I was telling you this, that my therapist used to say back then, oh, when you go on a date, instead of focusing on like, oh, is he good or does he like me? Like focus on like having just
Meaningful
positive
connection.
regards. No, just keep in your heart that this is a human being and I want to have like,
Respect them
she
for
would
who
say
they are.
unconditional positive regard. But as I was telling you, I couldn't like actually translate that into the date. Like I couldn't implement that when I was on a date. It was always that. But then when I went into this retreat, I was like, oh my God, I'm just gonna treat the guy like a girl.
right. But I want to, I think when we say something like this, I see you because I hear you and I feel you because like I think I got to a very similar place. Somebody might listen to this and think, oh, okay, so that's the trick. And if I do that, then I'm not going to have that issue. But
Oh yeah, no, that's
I
not
don't
a
find that to be
trick.
the case because let's say we break up, something happens. So we both have to go back into this space of being okay with ourselves, but also maybe be open to being in romantic relationships. Inevitably, I think if I go and meet another woman again, it's still going to be the same. There are going to be those feelings that initially come out where you're like, oh, like this is going to be something romantic. I should do this and I should do that. But the difference is when you have been for a few months, for a few years, kind of alone, like not in a romantic relationship, but you also haven't really spent every other hour or every other day thinking I should go date and I should be on a dating app. There is this like really beautiful like surface wave that develops where you're just kind of calm and like you view other people, opposite sex, same sex, whether you're gay or straight, like you just view them as like just human beings that you want
Right.
to meet with regard and get to know. And like
Right.
what value can I bring to this person? Like when you came and you're like, oh, I want to tell you, like, oh man, rheumatology is really this and that. I'm like, cool. Like, what can we talk about? And then we were talking, and you're like, look, I'm not trying to get advice for free or anything. I was like, what? Because I was consulting at the time, and I'm like, no, like we're just two human beings talking. It's not even
Right,
about that. I would love
right.
to, if I can offer you any advice. And I knew I was going to learn from you because you're a specialist and you went through burnout and you had a different route. So I was learning a lot from you, and you still do, right? I think both of us are still getting a lot out of this relationship. We're almost 3 years into it, and like I'm learning so much from you and running things by you, and you're learning a lot from me and obviously looking up to me, you know. And
Somebody is. No, but yeah,
but
I
it does.
guess
I think for somebody listening,
the whole like looking at as a guy, the guy as a girl, or for you, is that the whole I guess dilemma that I had, like sort of like or when I was like, well, how to just be with myself, you know, or the loneliness. But it's that we want connection with people, but then we are like, no, but not from her and not from him. And, oh, you know, oh, no, but I want it from you. But then now he's not giving it to me, right? Like, so it was like constantly this whole like,
I get it.
labels on people. But it was, I think for me, looking at men as like women, it was like, this is like this, I could be friends with this person, and this person is just a human being. And I remember I was walking, actually I went for a walk after the retreat, and I was walking by our house, and by my mom, when I was living with my mom, and this guy like was sitting at a bench in the street, and he said something to me, like, and I normally would have been like, oh my God, like, you know, like this guy's hitting on me, you know, and I would have tried to just nicely, but I was like, in a way, I was like, let me just look at this person. This person is like talking to me, you know, and he actually just said, like, he gave me a compliment, and then I was like, oh, thank you, and then I walked away, and I was like, wow, how like horrible was that? Or, but I mean, I guess I'm not talking about like, you know, in a way, it is forgetting your preconceived notions of people, but and one of the things that I think as a Persian woman I was told, but maybe as women in general, it's like you don't say everything to a guy that you tell your girlfriend.
Right.
And like that's exactly what I did with you. I told
Right.
you everything that I would tell my girlfriends and more because I was just being me. And I realized like most of the time I'm like, oh no, but you shouldn't say this. Oh no, but you shouldn't say this to this. But you should. It's like I'm just gonna be me, and yeah, it's gonna hurt
But
if I
I
like
think
somebody.
to
And
be
they're-
you, to be fully you, to be okay being you, requires you to not fear a potential loss. And I think when you view a romantic relationship as a big gain, then when you don't have it and you are alone, right, you're single, then you view it as a potential major loss if you don't put your best foot forward and play the game according to the rules that are like somebody has written on some dating app or book or whatever. Instead, when you just say like, hey, here's a human connection that I'm going to have, and no way can a human connection be a bad thing. And if I have enough of these human connections, I'm obviously going to grow from it. Other people are going to grow from it. This network of things is going to just like branch out into the rest of the world at some point.
maybe I think we worry that like, oh, what if this person, I have to then like reject them, or what if I get rejected, right? But I think the story that you said about this girl that you went out with, and then you were like, normally you would ghost people, and you called. I think it's because if you are ultimately, it all comes down to, for me, I think the journey is about like how to just accept myself. And it's like, if you are like, this is how I feel right now. I don't feel attracted to this person. I don't feel like a romantic relationship happening from this. And then you're like, okay, saying this to this person, and okay, like they're going to get mad, right? And it doesn't mean that they are bad, right? So then once you get rejected, then you're like, and it's just a practice, because I think like actually this, I really think that this journey of being single, and even then it's a different journey, but all of it is like, is in a way like it can be spiritual, not in the sense of like, esoteric, but it's more like a self-realization, because we realize through all this rejection, yeah, it's no different than like friends, right? Or people that we meet. Oh, I don't want to be friends with her. Oh, she's cool, I want to be friends with her. And it's like
Oh gosh,
on
we do that all the time,
steroids when
yeah.
when you're looking for a mate, or and it gets you to see how you feel so butthurt when you get rejected, when somebody says that I don't want to go out with you. Let's say they even say, I don't want to go out with you because, whatever, you have a big belly, or you have a big ass, or you have a big nose, or whatever. But it's like, how does it hurt so much? And that hurt is like, like I had a yoga teacher who would say like, this shit is fertilizer, like, is like, if you really sit with it, then you can also, instead of ghosting, then tell people like, I'm not feeling, like, you can be okay with yourself, like, I'm not attracted to this person because they're not tall, right? Instead of like, I know I had my things, and I'd be like, oh my God, you're so shallow, right? I beat myself up about it. And then I would also like feel really hurt by somebody else not liking me. But ultimately, I feel like the whole process can be like you just turning inward and accepting yourself more. And I think that's kind of what I was doing with this last therapist that I had, is like how to just be okay more with being with myself, because that doesn't mean that you're not wanting a partner.
No, that's why I keep saying I don't think when you put the effort and energy into like kind of being okay with being alone, it doesn't mean that you're going to stop looking for a romantic partner. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose the desire to be in a romantic relationship. If anything, somehow, some way, I think it just opens up the door that when you have these interactions, they're easier, they feel less forced, you don't have to reject people, you feel less rejected. These meaningful conversations and connections come up. When I came to Spain initially, in Sevilla and Barcelona, I don't think I had zero Spanish skills, so I wasn't really
sorry
getting
to interrupt you.
anywhere.
Do you think we should cut this into 2 parts?
Yeah.
Right?
I do want to finish this, but
Okay,
let me say this. I know what you mean, because like the loneliness. Well, what is this one then?
Well, because we're going to maybe transition into like more like also just kind of in general loneliness and the digital nomad part.
No, but like, what do you think this? What we
I
have
feel like
talked
this
about so far.
became more about meeting, dating, sort of pre-relationship, although I was going to say, like, even I think the reason that you and I sometimes even talk about this and then we go back to pre-meeting each other is because all of this fear of loneliness and like boredom or whatever plays into the relationship too. Fear of you breaking up with me, fear of like, and then all of these things, it can play into the actual relationship. But I feel like this episode is more like dating and relationship, right? Don't you think? And then we want to talk about loneliness is a part of it.
It could be, and I think you're right. I mean, this was what we've talked about so far is a little bit about dating and relationships, but I think maybe the way I got to it maybe was different than yours in the sense that I initially had to be okay.
Oh, right.
Not
you moved. Oh, I see.
Right,
okay,
right, and maybe not pursuing a romantic or not leading with that. I guess. And when I went to Spain by myself, it was that. It was like I was finding myself alone. But somehow, fortunately, I didn't feel lonely. And I think that happened because I had developed a bit of comfort around the fact that, yes, I'm alone, but obviously there's many people around me and I'm making connections, whether the barista at a coffee shop, this old German couple in Sevilla, in Barcelona.
You see that? I think that's actually worth a whole other like podcast or whatever episode, because I think that's really interesting to set off into a new place. Yeah, a lot of the components of ultimately being alone and being okay with yourself, but it's I think it's just, I don't know, to me it's a little bit of a different topic.
Sounds good. Let's end it. How many minutes? 50.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Take care.